Welcome to the City Movement Podcast. Each episode, we'll dive deeply into the Christian mission of the YMCA, provide practical tips for planting churches in Ys, and discuss the benefits of planting churches in the YMCA. We're your hosts, Jeff Snyder and Mike Newman. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Let's jump into today's episode. Well, welcome into episode 3. This is Jeff Snyder. I'm here with Mike Newman and wildcard, Jensen Harper, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
Jensen is the youth pastor at Antioch, and we're the church in the countryside YMCA. And I expect a lot more fun because Mike, if you would compare the amount of fun brought to a conversation, Jensen versus David Newman, give us a little bit of the difference there.
Yeah, give us a fun meter rating for me.
Fun meter on a scale of 1 to 2, I would say.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Wait, so 1 of 2, I'm a yes?
You're not supposed to question that. You're just supposed to go with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say amount of fun.
If you squint your eyes and look at the scale, it says yes. Amazing. It's a puzzle. Not just a scale, puzzle.
So here we are recording in our YMCA for our 3rd episode. For all you listeners out there, even just to say, this is our context for ministry. So you're going to hear all throughout we're recording, a blower might come on, or there might be kids banging dodgeballs up against a wall.
And there are kids.
Right now. That is happening.
Yeah, I'm sure they're playing with chalk or something out there. I can hear hula hoops.
But it is one of the wonderful things that it's a growing experience about planning a church in a YMCA is we love it. We love that there are people everywhere, but sometimes it doesn't feel like we always have our own space.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah, and that's good and encouraged. Like when you share space, it deliberately causes you to rub shoulders with people in the community. So the desire for the church planter out there, or any church or whatever, is to have their own space. Schools talk about it. We just want our own space. It is more messy when you share space, but it's worth it because you're interacting with people outside your normative circles. So
for sure,
it's a good thing.
Yeah,
it's a good thing. Yeah.
Okay, well, Jensen, in episode 1, we each did a little bit of a introduction to who we are, how we're connected to this movement. So why don't you give us that? Who is Jensen Harper? How is he connected to this greater Church in the Y movement?
Jensen Harper is an Enneagram 4 that has abandoned the Enneagram.
And then come back to it.
And then come back to it.
That's such a 4 move.
Yeah, wouldn't it? Yeah.
We were...
All fours
Kelsey and I were texting back and forth about our kids' social security numbers yesterday because we're signing up for new health insurance. And she was texting about the end of their social security numbers. And she said, Caleb is a 9, Anna is a 4. And I thought she was talking about the Enneagram.
That's right.
And I said, oh, no, I can't have a 4.
Yeah. Yes. Well, 4s are the most distinguished in any tribe. Even an infant, you can just
who
look them in the eye.
Who is Jensen Harper?
You just Annabelle Snyder. How old is she now?
2 months.
You just take a look right in her retinas, and you're like, that's a 4. I know Mark of it. We have very similar retinas.
Tell us about Jensen Harper and how he's connected to this movement.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah, YMCA. So, I'm 25, graduated from Samford University, go Bulldogs. And as I was going through my last semester of college, I got a call from you saying that our executive pastor is moving to the CEO of the YMCA across the street, across the street from our offices. And I was really stoked about the opportunity. Most importantly, I was excited about the global movement of churches inside of the Y. So I've been here for 2 years now, 2.5 years almost.
Yep.
It's been a whirlwind, but this is probably one of my favorite parts about doing ministry. Obviously, seeing disciples made locally, but it is really cool and encouraging in moments where I'm like, why am I doing this? It's cool to know this is happening all across the world.
Yeah. Jensen left out one of the really cool parts of his story, and that is, it has been such a blessing to be a part of a local church where I got to disciple Jensen when he was in high school at our church, and then here we are 10 years later, and Jensen is on staff as the youth pastor and now doing the same thing that I was doing 10 years ago when I first started meeting with Jensen. And so that's just such a cool example of the body of Christ functioning and flourishing the way I think it's meant to. So,
Yeah.
good job.
You're a good discipler.
Oh,
nice
well,
job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I can also point to many evidences that might not say that.
Sure. Fair. Enneagram 4. But I agree. And I think that's...
Do you guys want to talk about it?
Yeah.
Well,
Can we just pause the podcast?
hold on a second. I need to take a moment. No, I mean, I think whenever you articulate it that way, you don't really hear a whole lot of examples. But when I think of certain examples, I'm like, those guys are weirdos that like love the church and grow up in it. But the reality is that like, you're a cool guy, Jeff. And I've seen the meaning of your discipleship in my life, and I want it for other people. And that's the whole heart of why we're doing what we're doing, is to see people multiplied.
To make disciples.
Yeah,
for sure. I love what you said when you were talking about the global purpose of the why, when you were talking about why we're here. And so that's kind of where we're going in this episode is...
In this ep.
This ep, that's right. We're calling them eps now.
Epi.
In this ep, the one thing we're going after, if we could say
Why
one
not?
sentence, is why plant a church in a YMCA?
Right.
Because when you plant a church in a Y, you're connected to this larger movement of Ys all over the world, which is a flourishing spiritual organization, even more across the world than it is in the United States. And that's such a cool thing that we get to be a part of in the Y. And Jensen is kind of our resident expert on recently kind of leaning into that global YMCA movement. And so we're going to kind of set you up with a few questions because we want to hear about what you've been doing over the last year or year and a half as it relates to that and learn a little bit from you in that. So let me just throw this at you right now.
Okay.
The mission of the Y, as we talked about in our last episode, not episode.
Yeah.
Okay. In our last episode, we talked about the Paris basis, right, which is kind of the purpose of a church, which sometimes gets lost in the context of the Y of the USA.
Sure.
But how have you been involved in movements in other countries or on other continents where you've seen that really lived out in the context of the Y?
Yeah, for sure. I liked what you said on the last episode, that most places don't consciously think about why they do what they do. And oftentimes I feel like many organizations go through those ebbs and flows of on fire for the mission statement, losing sight of it, and coming back to the original roots of it. And I feel like that's what's happening all around the world right now. And I did get to have a taste of it 2 summers ago, or was it just last summer?
It was 14 months ago, maybe.
Shoot, that's crazy. Yeah, so do you want me to tell a story about how that came about, or what my experience was actually on the ground, or all of
Just
the
give us a
above? What would be
summary
helpful?
of what you did when you went overseas and how it was connected to the Y.
So I was at a mentor's lake house in Atlanta, Georgia, and I got a phone call from our head pastor, David Newman. He said, Jensen, there is a group of Christians in Europe that are looking to send one American delegate on a team of international young people to go and be the, I guess, Christian emphasis team at the 175th anniversary of the YMCA. And I was still kind of coming into my own in terms of pastoring at our local church, and wanted to make sure that that was my main commitment, was making sure our church was doing okay and our youth ministry was okay. Even though the opportunity seemed so sweet, I was like, I don't feel like things are great here right now, and I want to make sure that everything's solid before I go. And I was nervous about leaving. And ultimately Dave was like, bro, you got to go. Everything was paid for, and we just had to fly me over there. So I went for it, flew over to London, and then got a flight to Munich, landed, and I was picked up on a train station by a large German man named Ernest, who was sporting a tank top, Air Jordans, and an American flag cape. It was amazing.
It's a great visual.
He goes, should I try to do a German accent? Or that
Yes.
Yeah, let's hear it.
He goes, oh, are you Jensen? And I was like, yes. He goes, hello, I'm Ernest. After I had left that trip, I got a direct message on WhatsApp, and he said, Jensen, well, I guess he wouldn't have an accent. He just said, Jensen, I'm looking for a drag racing wheel. Can you find me one in America? And I thought,
Home of the free and drag racing. Wheels.
Yes.
Wow.
So, I made a lot of friends while I was over there, and it was really cool to be a part of a team of 18 to 24-year-olds from Colombia, Peru, the UK, Where else? Germany. A lot of this Christian emphasis is coming out of Germany, specifically the Munich YMCA, and it's just really powerful what they're doing. So I was just encouraged.
And that group of people that you were with from all over the world, were those all Y employees or something just Y members?
That's a great point. Actually, all of them worked inside of the YMCA to some extent, except for me. I was not a YMCA employee, but I was a church employee. So it's kind of undercover. All of these people were all about the YMCA. So from a friend of mine named Nicole, she did childcare at YMCA Black Country in the UK. And then I had a friend, David, who was from Colombia. He was involved with doing like a little bit older of a crew, like 5th and 6th graders. So it kind of ranged, but all of them were employees of the YMCA. And so they were all stoked about the Christian emphasis inside of the YMCA. And it was young people, which is really cool to hear.
Yeah. So coming back to what kind of our original sentence or question was, like, how cool is it that when we are planning a church in a YMCA, the organization in and of itself, we send one of our pastors to a conference across the sea, and there's 25 other young people that work for the YMCA that are also saying, yes, the purpose of this organization is to make disciples and exalt Jesus.
Yeah.
And like David said in our last episode, we love churches everywhere. We wouldn't say that there's necessarily like, this is the only way to do church. Mm-hmm. But we think that one of the awesome, unique niches of the YMCA is that it's an organization that exists for the same purposes that the church exists, in essence. Right, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, there's nuance there, but there's a great partnership that's happening that is distinct and maybe different than if a church would say, hey, we want to plant a church in this city. Should we do it in a movie theater? Should we do it in a school? And the why we've seen across the globe, and what you're saying, Jensen, as well, is that they want churches. And churches help meet their goal of reaching the community for Christ. And obviously, churches want to glorify God by sharing the gospel, bringing the lost in, and having them saved. So it's nuanced, but yeah.
I remember a follow-up call after we had went to the event, and so our group was called Mission Possible. That was our group.
All right.
I didn't create the name, but it was a cool name, and but I didn't make it, just to make sure we're clear. Anyways, so after our follow-up from the event, I remember talking. We were in small groups, and I was connecting with friends, Peru, Colombia. I was in a South American group, and I was talking with them, and they're all very connected with the YMCA. But I said, are you guys able to connect to a local church? And they said, no, we have no one. We're the only Christians in our YMCA, and we're just looking for other Christians to partner with. Those 2 weeks that we were all together, those are the best 2 weeks of my life, because I was around Christians for the first time in a long time. So I think a lot of these YMCA employees see the need for Christ in their YMCA. They also see a need for the church as well. And I think this is a need that's being seen all across the world. It's obvious. Yeah, it's happening right now. So it was really interesting, because I assumed that all these young people that are on fire for the Lord had a fellowship they were connected to. But it was really only through the YMCA that they first heard about Christ. Yeah. And so there is this overlap for sure. The YMCA at its core is to exalt the name of Jesus, share the gospel with people. The church as well, that's overlap. But the way they go about it looks very different. I don't think the YMCA has resources to make sure strong discipleship happens. That's the responsibility of the local church. And so many of these Y employees that are walking with Christ desire that so much. So that was one of the things that struck me as you guys were having that conversation. It was like, yes, this is the desire that so many Christians in the YMCA need, is this partnership between YMCA and church. And they both function unique roles with some overlap.
Yeah. Mike, one of the things that I'm going to throw a curveball at you and ask you to share here, that I love that you do is when you're thinking missionally or in many other contexts, you often think about the YMCA first, even if it's worldwide. So the example I'm going to share and ask you to talk about is there was an explosion in Beirut earlier this year. Beirut. Sorry, Beirut.
No problem.
Earlier this year, and you why don't you just say what your response was there and what that led to?
Yeah, I think, I mean, when that blast happened, I would say a general stereotype of most Americans was that we had news fatigue. There was so much news to keep up with that, there's COVID going on, there's, just political things going on, there's hunger, starvation, and then this blast comes and if we're not careful, we can just be numb to the needs of mankind, right? And so when I initially heard of that blast, I confess that I was just fatigued of news, and I didn't know what to do. It's hard when you receive news and you just don't have the ability to do anything about it.
Yep.
And so we can pray, and then I think the Christian who lives in our case Lebanon, Ohio, can go, well, maybe there's a church that I could reach out to or pray for, and so you maybe Google a church in Beirut or whatever. And I reached out to a couple pastors there, but I also reached out to the YMCA and the YWCA. And our church was currently preaching through the 7 churches in Revelation, and we were on the church of Philadelphia, where Philadelphia, contextually, that church was experiencing great persecution, and they were also historically experiencing earthquakes. And so some historians say that because they were continually experiencing earthquakes, that they were in poverty as a church, because they were always taking care of the physical structure of the church and the needs of the church members, hey, my roof cracked, my walls cracked, yeah. Can I help? So it's just a tough place to live in. Anyways, we were going through that church in Philadelphia. The blast happened, and I feel like the Lord just quickened my heart to respond to it, saying, hey, let's see how the Y is doing over there. We had been praying for opportunities or open doors to minister to communities around the world. And when I reached out to the Y, they said, hey, our doors are cracked. Our walls are cracked. Our doors are blown out off the hinges, and all our windows are shattered from this blast.
Yeah.
Which, in Philadelphia, it was walls cracked. God introduces himself and says hey, I'm the guy who's got the keys, and I'm going to open doors. So we had doors going on, and it was in terms of geeky pastor moment, I was this has such beautiful sermonic unity.
Some would say prophetic sermonic unity.
And so but we pitched it out to our church hey, there's a Y in need. Let's give over and above and beyond our means. And it was so cool. Our church gave, your church gave, and we were able to buy them all new doors, buy them all new windows, and help. And what we're doing is we are praying that a church would be planted in that Y, not ashamed, not bashful about it. We want to plant a church in Beirut. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, it will.
And I mean, Jesus says to use your money strategically on this earth to make friends. That's what he use it to gain relational favor. And so we're let's use our money, and we want to move forward and take this step of faith. So we'll see. But we would love to plant a church there one day.
Yeah.
So
that was awesome. I loved that when crisis happened, as a church in a YMCA, we can not only reach out to churches in a region, but there are, as David has said, there are 14,000 Ys all over the world. So we can reach out to Ys and connect with them as well. And I thought that was such a great example of you doing that earlier this year. And you even mentioned in your response news fatigue and COVID and everything else going on. And another thing, this maybe is the last thing we'll talk about during COVID that has happened, is the YMCA worldwide has gathered and had prayer calls on Facebook in response to coronavirus. I think there were at least 2 or 3 that happened earlier this year. And Jensen, you emceed one of them. Can you just tell us a little bit about that experience? Tell us just what it was and what it was like to be a part of it.
Well, I felt like both the moments that I was involved with some of this more global components of the Christian emphasis in the YMCA, it felt as though I couldn't have worked. It really felt like a working of God, because the first one, when Dave told me, it just felt weird, where Dave calls me and he says, there's a group that is looking to send 1 American delegate, all expense paid, which it was really nice of that. I felt kind of bad, but I was like, whatever I can do to go, I'll go. And it just felt like the Lord's hand was on it. And then the second one was like through those relationships that I created while I was in Munich for a week and then in London for a week. I just grew in these relationships with some of the more, I would say, like bigwigs within the Christian emphasis part of the YMCA. And through these relationships, they invited me to be the MC of one of the prayer calls that they had throughout some of the COVID season. It was really crazy. Like, I mean, I didn't feel like I had any conversations with them of like, hey, if you ever need an MC or anything like that, if you ever need an American to fly over and be a part of this international group, it just seemed like,
man, that's awesome.
Some of these avenues were
in
open
response to coronavirus, the YMCA, hundreds of people from the YMCA across the world are coming together to pray for unity and peace in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. And it's just like, how cool that because we're planning a church in YMCA, we get to be a part of that. Yeah, we get to say to our whole church, hey, hop on this prayer call. Yeah, the Y around the world, we're praying for peace and unity.
And they were some of these guys, because in terms of church planning, Christian emphasis is strong within the YMCA. But in terms of church planning, that seems to be a more of an American thing right now. So if you look at a lot of the YMCAs, they have strong Christian emphasis, but not a whole lot of local church partnerships. And I think every time I engage in a conversation and I said that I don't work for a YMCA, I'm a youth pastor, they were like, really? That's so fascinating. That's so cool. Well, we're glad you're here. And I think that through those conversations, I was learning a lot about the context that we plant in. Yep. And I think these guys were learning, oh, this is what churches are after. And we can see, they were kind of catching the vision for churches in Ys, and I was kind of gaining a picture of church in the Y, in their Y. And they were saying, how can we get churches in our Ys? And it was just cool. It was this really fun kind of mixture between the two, because I was the more church guy. They were the more YMCA guys. And we were partnering together to figure out, we're going to put 2 together. This could be something sweet. You know, it was really fun to connect.
Well, I mean, hopefully everyone listening, you've caught a flavor for planting churches in YMCAs isn't just about our churches in Cincinnati. It's not just about churches in the Pacific Northwest or churches in Florida. It's about connecting to a worldwide movement of the YMCA and the Christian emphasis in that movement in churches all across the world. So, Mike, is there anything else you would say to zero in on that or close us out?
Yeah. I don't think so. I mean, much to say, but conversations to come. I'm excited. Mm-hmm.
Jensen, anything else to conclude your first appearance on the podcast?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great. I'm glad I could really finish out the Ohio State coloring we have going on here. It's really cool.
You know, when I moved here in 2017, I was given a little welcome basket, and I wasn't like given any like t-shirts from like the church or anything. I was given a Buckeye shirt.
You're truly indoctrinated. Let's go.
What in the world is that?
We just don't have a lot of church t-shirts around here. I don't know what you want from us.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, I've worn it faithfully for 3 years now, and I like it. It looks
Jeff,
good. Thanks, man.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah.
Is that fine? I just thought it was so cool. And this is kind of to summarize our episode. I just thought it was amazing. Going over, so Silver Bay, whenever we were connecting at our American church planning network for the YMCA, we have an annual conference, and we meet at this YMCA, what would you call it, resort?
Conference center.
Yeah. Perfect.
It's cool.
And I remember connecting with a guy, his name was Parker, and he was out on the West Coast, and I remember we had this great relationship, whatever, and our hearts are on fire for doing this thing in America. And then I remember going over to London for the 175th anniversary, and we were part of this ecumenical team, and I looked across this big circle, and I was like, I think I know that guy. It turns out it was Parker. It was like almost, it was like in Pink Panther, whenever Steve Martin links up with the English James Bond sort of characters, like French, like Jacques Clouseau, and he's like, there's this big heist going on, and both of them gravitate towards it as if it's like, we both have the common interest in fighting bad guys. We're both here at this moment.
But just so we're clear, Jensen Harper doesn't watch movies.
No, stop. That's an inside joke. Inside joke. I don't watch a lot of movies, but I have watched The Pink Panther, and I do know that it's really cool that people are catching the heart for this and seeing the simplicity of it. Obviously, there is nuance, there's complexity, but it is fun whenever you hear about this mission, you get excited about it, and you, without even talking about it or discussing it, you see familiar faces thousands of miles away from home with the same goal of making disciples and sharing the gospel with people.
Yeah.
That was really special for me.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jensen. Thank you for joining the podcast and upping the cool factor and the fun level. All right.
Let's go.
Hey, well, for Mike Newman and Jensen Harper, I'm Jeff Snyder. That was the City Movement Podcast.